Thank you very much. This is a true honor. So, I'm going to tell you about a problem that I found that exists within our healthcare system through my own personal experience. And then I'm going to tell you how we're going to fix that problem. And I'm going to tell you this story through my own personal journey suffering a spinal cord injury. But this problem and this gap in the healthcare system relates to people with all types of physical disabilities, whether you suffer a stroke, traumatic brain injury, amputation, whatever it may be. This affects millions of people. So the story begins on August 5th, 2006. As you can see in these pictures, I was living the dream. I woke up that morning next to my beautiful girlfriend, who's now my wife, sitting here. I just bought a house in Hermosa Beach, California. I had an incredible job that I loved. Everything was perfect. I was an avid athlete. I was skiing every weekend, playing volleyball, playing basketball. I played college football. I was in great shape. And that morning, I was going to play volleyball with some friends, just to have a wonderful summer day. And then this is me a few hours later. Now, I'm actually going to stop right now because I'm trying to figure out why my wife is so happy in this picture. This is hours after. We'll talk about that tonight. But I was playing volleyball at the beach with my friends, and I ran in for a swim, and I dove in through a wave like I did every other day, and I hit my head on a sandbar, and I was instantly paralyzed. And I remember floating out there in the ocean on my back, and I was lucky that I was on my back so I could take some deep breaths of air, and I literally thought that could be the end of my life. Luckily, a gentleman saw me out there, and he rushed out and dragged me to safety. And then I was in the hospital, and obviously, it was the most traumatic experience you could ever imagine. It was so unbelievably ridiculous that you didn't really know what to think whatsoever. How do I continue with my life from here? Am I ever going to have a family? How do I ever go back to work? Am I ever going to have any type of true life after this moment? And then the doctors came in. And the doctors told me that there's no hope for my recovery. I should get used to playing board games for the rest of my life. That to me was unbelievable. How could they tell me what I was capable of or not capable of doing? They just met me. And who are they to tell me that I can't get out of this? I can't figure out a way out of this problem. So I was lying there in the hospital, and I was trying to figure out how was I going to get myself out of this situation. And that's when I thought about sisu. I'm originally from Finland, and sisu is defined, there's no true definition to it, but it's defined as an inner spirit that lives inside all Finns. And it means to be courageous in the face of adversity, but it's much more than that. It also means to be rational in the face of adversity. And more than anything else, it means to never, ever complain in the face of adversity. And I was an extremely proud Finn, and I could not imagine living my life without sisu. And I remember being there in the hospital and looking at my father, and I only saw him cry one other time, and that was when my grandfather died. And I wanted to make sure that he was happy, and my girlfriend was happy, and all my loved ones were happy, and the only way that I could do that was to be happy myself. So I asked myself a really simple question: do I want to live a happy life? The answer was yes. So then from that point on, I just asked myself that question every morning. How am I going to be today? What's the one thing today that's going to make me happy? Whether it was watching a movie or literally just smiling, that's what I did every single day. I spent 2 months in the intensive care unit. Coded 2 times, was battling 104-degree fever with a really bad case of pneumonia. There was no hope whatsoever. We kept fighting. And at that point in time, my girlfriend started flying around the country trying to figure out, where am I going to go to do my rehab after I'm out of here? And every time she came back from a different facility, she felt dejected just because there was nothing out there. There was no progressive rehab facility anywhere that we found. Until one day, through a friend of mine in college, we were introduced to a doctor by the name of Susan Harkema at Frazier Rehab in Louisville, Kentucky. Susan came back from that trip, and she was in tears when she walked in the intensive care unit. And she said, "We're moving to Kentucky." And I said, "You gotta be kidding me." And I said, "Why?" And she said, Dr. Harkema was the first person through this entire process that told her that there was hope for my recovery. Because without hope, you have nothing. So at that instant, we decided to go to Kentucky. And Dr. Harkema, she was the preeminent rehab specialist in the world, one of the most preeminent researchers in the world. And her whole theory behind spinal cord injury was not only that there is hope, but there's evidence-based research that proves that you can recover. And the whole mentality with her was, the traditional thinking was, once you have a spinal cord injury, you can't regain any function back. And at that point in time, all I could do was move my arms a little bit. So with traditional therapy, all your rehab would consist of doing bicep curls. Dr. Harkema's therapy was called activity-based training. And that's focusing on all your weaknesses to try to regain your function back. And she invented a therapy called Locomotor Training. You can cue the video.
She developed a cutting-edge therapy called Locomotor Training, which teaches the spinal cord
Locomotor
how to
training
control motor functions
is when you're
like walking through repetitive
on a treadmill,
motion.
weight-bearing in a
Mr.
harness,
Reed was among
and
her
you have
first
trainers
test
that move your legs and arms for you. You're basically simulating what it's like to walk again, to stimulate your nervous system and regain that function back. Louisville, Kentucky was the only place in the country that was going to allow me to do locomotor training, so that's why we went there. It didn't quite hit me at that moment, not until later on that I realized, how is it possible that I live in California and I have to move to Kentucky to get rehab? We're in the 7th largest economy in the world, and I had to leave everything behind simply to get rehab. My girlfriend had to leave her job, we had to leave our families, we had to leave our house, our entire life behind, just to go get rehab. The only reason we were able to do it was because we had the financial means to do it. What about all those people that did not have that access? What was their life going to be like? But luckily, we were able to go. This is me at Frazier Rehab. I had an unbelievable experience there. Immediately after starting to do locomotor training, I started regaining function, getting stronger. It was truly an amazing experience for me. As you can see from that picture, I started getting a lot healthier. Due to my improved circulation, my skin tone got better, my overall health and wellness got better. But also throughout this whole process, I realized the one key thing was being able to laugh, being able to have fun through this traumatic experience, and taking ridiculous situations that I was in every single day and making them fun. So one perfect example was, there was a point for about a month, I had so much phlegm in my lungs from my pneumonia that I had to have a suction tube shoved down my throat every 15 minutes so I could breathe. And I remember my really good friend, my trainer, coming in one day, and he saw me getting suction, and he'd been working in the hospital for years, and he had to run out of the room to throw up after seeing this. It's not funny to you guys, but it's hysterical to me and him. So now, every time for the next month I was getting suction so I could breathe, I started cracking up thinking about him running out of the room. I remember too, my nurses would come in all the time, and I'd love the show Deadwood on HBO. And I'd throw Deadwood on when the nurses would come in. Just I'd love listening to Swearingen talk, and the nurses would have a fit because he was swearing so much, and there was all these really graphic sex scenes, and that situation was so uncomfortable in that nursing room. So I just tried to figure out all these fun ways to make my hospital experience a good time, and it really was. But then I realized when I was in the hospital, so where I did most of my rehab was on one floor, and the inpatients lived on another floor. And that's a picture of me up on the locomotor treadmill. I lived with about 30 or so individuals that had spinal cord injuries. I was the only one on my floor who was participating in the locomotive program. So there's 30 people in there that have the best therapy in the world at their fingertips. They can see it, they can look at it, and they were not able to participate in it. I could not imagine being one of those individuals. And why they couldn't participate? There simply wasn't room, or their insurance didn't cover it. I just felt terrible for those people. But I was fortunate to be able to do it, and it saved my life. About 4 months into my injury, I remember my doctor walked in the room. He said, "Hey, Janne, why don't you try wiggling your toe?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Just do it." So I did. I didn't feel anything. I said, "Hey, try doing it again." "All right." He picked up the sheet, and he goes, "You just wiggled your toe." And that was the most incredible moment of my life, because I realized at that moment I had a chance. And I called my girlfriend. She came rushing in, and it was a cry fest on the whole floor. And it was really an incredible opportunity. After that point, about a month later, I was released from the hospital. I stayed another 6 months in Kentucky, doing rehab for 8 hours a day. We started doing some research. We knew we wanted to move home to California. What was I going to do when I moved home to California? We found out that there was millions of people all across the country who were stuck at home without access to any type of rehab, or fitness, or health, or wellness services. Without that access, what is their life going to be like? So at that point in time, we learned, the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation did a study, that there's 6 million people in the United States that are living with paralysis, 30 million people that are living with mobility impairments, and the average person gets to spend 36 days in rehab. 36 days, that's it. Here in LA, it's 16. That's like telling somebody who gets an ACL tear, here's a Band-Aid, that's all you get. What happens if you don't have access to these type of services? You're going to turn into this guy. No, diabetes, secondary life-threatening complications, heart disease, stroke. So many different things that can affect you. It has nothing to do with just being able to walk. This opportunity really became my life's passion and my mission. We knew that we had to do something about this. There's 6 million people in America that needed our help. So what are we going to do? There's a really simple solution, and they already had it at Frazier Rehab. Why don't we take what you guys are doing here in the best rehab center in the country, take it out of the hospital, put it into a community setting, so everybody in the community can have access to the best rehab in the world within their own community. So that's where Next Step was born. All we did was take what they offered in the best hospital-based setting, took it out of the hospital, and put it right into the community. So with the help of Dr. Harkema and our friends and family, we built Next Step Fitness here in Los Angeles in June. We opened in June of 2008. We wanted to ensure that everybody can have the opportunity to live a long, healthy, and happy life. And our mission now, as an organization, is to build these facilities in communities across the country and eventually globally. So no matter if you're living with a spinal cord injury or stroke, or you're a wounded service member, you can have access to affordable, progressive fitness, health, and wellness services for the rest of your life. Who here thinks exercise is important? Right? When I moved to LA, think about how many Pilates studios, fitness studios, hot yoga, cold yoga, naked yoga. There's about 10,000 different types of fitness services for able-bodied people in Los Angeles. When I moved here, there wasn't a single one for people with disabilities. This is Amanda. For 15 years, she lived in LA and didn't have access to these services. She always dreamed of having a family, but she wasn't strong enough, healthy enough, didn't have the courage. But once she had access to those resources, she gained her health back. She got married, and just a couple years ago, she had her first child. This is Amanda. She's 15 years old and she got hurt in Canada in a skiing accident. The doctors also literally told her to get used to playing board games for the rest of her life. There's nothing available to her in Canada, so she came to Next Step here in LA. 3 months after her injury, she went bungee jumping. All these pictures up there, those are Amanda a year after her injury. She's skiing every day, snowmobiling, skydiving, kayaking. These are 5 of our members, a quadruple amputee, traumatic brain injury. Doctors told him he would never compete in a triathlon again. These 5 individuals all finished the Pasadena Triathlon last year. And thanks to me being fortunate and having access to these resources, my wife stuck with me. And we got married, something that I never thought could happen. But because I was fortunate to have access to these services, I was able to get married. I went surfing. Never thought I could go surfing. And this is about 4 years ago. I walked for the first time with the help of a walker. And even more exciting, about a year ago, I was finally able to give my wife a wedding dance. None of this would have been possible if I didn't have access to these resources. And I was fortunate. So I ask you today to join me in this movement and make sure that your communities have these types of resources available. And it's not just for people who are already injured, it's for all of you and your family members, your children, your loved ones. Don't wait for something to happen to them to make sure they have access to these types of resources. We need to work together to make sure that everybody around the world has access to the best in healthcare today. And I also encourage you, as everybody here has told you tonight, to be courageous in your lives and live with Sisu. Thank you.